sticking with me for the time being, we're going to look at that first statement that teaching quality is more important than how lessons are delivered. And if we dive beneath that headline into the multi-page evidence review, which you can see in front of you, which is free to download from the EEF website, and I recommend reading it if you can find the time. This is the more paragraph of information about that first statement. So what's quite reassuring, if you've just done a year of training, is it's saying that good quality explanations, scaffolding work, and giving feedback to students is more important than whether we are teaching live stream sessions or whether we're pre-recording sessions or delivering sessions through a remote learning platform or tool, okay? So just to emphasize this, what matters most, according to the evidence, is that the explanations are high quality, and by that we don't just mean we're clear, but they build on pupils' prior knowledge, and that we subsequently assess pupils' understanding of the new information we've imparted, okay? Now this isn't exactly new. So the EEF came out with this rapid evidence review earlier this year in response to school closures, but it's not new, right? Because it's not based on brand new evidence. It's a sift of the evidence that was already out there. I don't know if you've read Kirshner and Hendrick's book, What Does This Look Like in the Classroom, which was the first collaboration they did, an absolutely fantastic summary of bits of evidence and how we can apply them to the classroom. But more recently, they've written this book, How Learning Happens, another fascinating read. I was reading it about a month and a half ago. Nikki and I are going to trade books. She wants it as well. And actually, they refer to one of the seminal works in educational psychology as being from 1983 by a researcher called Clark, who wrote a paper reconsidering research on learning from media. And this was in response to discussions that still go on now, but were going on back then, along the lines of, well, technology means that we won't need a person in the room with the kids. We can just, it can all be automated. They can learn off whiz-bangy interactive videos and animations and all sorts. And what he said then, when he reviewed the evidence, still appears to stand today. The quote on the board, I rather like the quote that's on the, sorry, on the screen right now, the board, force of habit, that the mechanism, the media, the technology we use is merely the delivery vehicle, okay? That stands. And Kirshner and Schweller summarized this with the phrase, the medium is not the message. Kirshner and Schweller go, sorry, Kirshner, not Schweller, Kirshner and Hendrick go on to summarize that seminal piece of work as follows. No one medium, so technology platform, Zoom versus Teams versus Google Hangouts, etc., 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 is intrinsically better than any other. It's the quality of instruction we provide that makes the difference. We've got to be really careful, particularly now, avoiding falling prey to hype around certain platforms. For example, the calls for live delivery. This isn't really specific to technology use, but engagement is not the same as learning. We've got to be really careful with remote teaching that we don't just stop in terms of our assessment of how pupils are getting on by saying, oh, well, they did the work. Oh, well, they watched that video, etc. This is, I think, always relevant. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it from Kate and her team. If you're going to use slides or anything else, it's perhaps even more relevant when remote teaching to bear in mind what cognitive load theory says about extraneous load and what dual coding says about a coherent mix of audio and visual, as opposed to audio and visual that clash and overload students. We've got to be so careful. And if anything, we need to chunk content even more carefully through remote delivery than we do when we're in the classroom with students, when we can see when we've overloaded them because they grimace, they fidget, etc., etc. A bit more on the medium not being the message. If you are interested in exploring a bit more about this, I would signpost a couple of EEF guidance reports. Now, the first one is probably one of the least accessed on the EEF website because it sounds dull. It's about the use of digital technology in the classroom. But what's really interesting is the headline recommendations from this point in exactly the same sort of direction. So the first one is, don't just slap on some new technology before you've thought carefully about how will it improve your teaching and pupils' learning. If you cannot see the pedagogy, the rationale for the pedagogy that's linked to that technology, be cautious. Okay, potentially you're getting hypnotized by flashy technology. Okay, you don't want the technology to undermine your good teaching or be a barrier to your good teaching being transmitted to students. On the positive side, this guidance report talks about how technology can improve the quality of our explanations and modeling. For example, a good quality animation if used well, or a video that can be rewound and played again in a way that it can't be live in class all the time if you're the one talking. Another recommendation talks from this guidance report says that technology offers ways to improve the impact of pupil practice. So certain platforms like Seneca, where the learning and the tasks assigned to students are adapted based on an algorithm of what they get right, what they get wrong, provide students with intelligent practice that evolves. This is potentially something to take advantage of right now, and it's sat there waiting to be used. And then technology can play a role in improving the quality of assessment and feedback. So stating the obvious, technology can assess faster than we can and potentially more consistently than we can. Technology doesn't have a glass of wine and get a bit lazier about assessing essays as the evening gets longer. Stuff like comparative judgment is still useful right now. Auto-marking quizzes will mean that you don't have to mark the work in some cases and may even throw feedback straight back at students without you having to do something. And if you've already got platforms like that, for goodness sake, intelligently use them. Don't reinvent the wheel.